Well, I thank you for the opportunity to be here and to share a couple of what I think are some exciting results that we've had over the last couple of years, because I'm not just going to show you 1 year's worth of data that we were able to get. If I get there and the timekeeper is generous, I'll throw in a second year, some post data as well to kind of show you how things are progressing. It is tough to be one of the last group of speakers coming up, especially after you're probably tired and after the gentleman had a wonderful presentation. But just like Sergio was transforming his communities and working towards a lot of different things, what we decided to do was transform policing. And we wanted to do that specifically through a couple of means: accountability, trust, and you've heard the word legitimacy probably all day today. But it's a very important word, and it goes a long ways in a bunch of different things that we've been talking about over the last couple of days. So the first question, just to kind of start off with, is why? Why would we even go out on a limb and put these cameras on cops? Why would we try to do this kind of research, and what's really the background behind it? Well, I'm not going to take credit for it, because honestly, it starts with this picture. And the story is, very quickly, is back when I was a captain several years ago, I was sitting in my office, and we had a tour go through the station. And it was a bunch of kids, and it was a 6th grade group, and this youngster, Josh, came into my office and said, "Hey, you know what? I want to be a cop just like you." And I said, "That's great." And so he slid this piece of paper over to me, and it was a drawing that he did. And although the drawing is very funny, if you kind of think at it, we're kind of weird in policing, and we think, hey, this guy's getting tased, it's kind of funny. We kept it, I hung it up in my office for quite some time. And the more I thought about it, the more it kind of sunk in. Is this really what a 6th grader thinks, what a cop really is, and what a cop really does? And it just so happened at the same time, about a year or so later, I was finishing up my graduate studies at Cambridge University over in England, and we thought, wouldn't it be great if we really put this stuff to the test? There's cell phone video out all over the place. Let's look at cameras and cops and see if the two can really mix and what's really going to be the outcome. So let's look for some outcomes here. Another thing that kind of fed into my research and the drive that I knew I was probably going in the right direction was this article, and you can find it online, and I won't spend too much time on it. But it really talks about 7 cities, and no disrespect to the cities, but it outlines 7 cities where the payouts on use of force related cases were unbelievable. And it kind of looks like this. And you can pick whichever one you want here, but everybody tends to gravitate towards the upper right. And again, if you look at 1 year, and again, this is just, we're giving you the facts here, New York Police Department in 2011 paid out $185.6 million. Now think what you could do with that money and where it could really be better spent. And then, of course, as a police chief and being in law enforcement for about 33 years now, I know, and this might be new to you, but about out of every 30 police officers in the U.S. are being sued annually. And about 40 to 45% of all those lawsuits, those allegations, they're use of force. So as a police chief, that's something that really kind of, you take it to heart. So how are you going to mitigate some of that stuff? What are you really going to do to try to make your law enforcement agency that you lead by example? So we kind of looked at the problem, and I'll kind of walk through the experiment basically. We looked at the public's perception of police, and I know that's a horrible word. It's in the dictionary. It's probably the worst word ever to come about, but the public's perception of police use of force continues to be a concern in law enforcement. And I have to say, we don't have anybody from the media here, do we? Okay, they don't always help us. They're not always our best friends. Sometimes they can help us when we really need them, and sometimes we have great partnerships with them, but a lot of time the information that they may put out initially isn't quite as accurate as it really is in the end. Or too many incidents in which officers are just using force. Are the officers misinterpreting the contact? Have they not been trained properly? Or do we just have aggressive suspects? Do we have a problem out there in the community that you're living in? The high number of citizen complaints against police officers. Okay, are we really misbehaving? Are we really that bad? Or do people file bogus lawsuits and bogus complaints? So a couple of the challenges that we looked at basically is reducing the use of force in complaints without changing the frequency and nature of contacts with the public. And what that really means is, if we wear these cameras, are we going to sit in the police cars and not be proactive? Are we not going to contact anybody? And some people thought that, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We felt that it really required a third-party systematic observation, a mechanism that would scientifically measure both the implementation and the outcome of what we were going to do, and that would be the cameras. And of course, you always have to look at money, the cost effectiveness, what are you going to get out of it, the bang for the buck, and how much is it going to cost to implement it. And then what might seem the easiest part, which is really kind of the hardest part, is as a leader in a police organization or anywhere else, how do you do this? How do you get everybody in the department to go along with this and to implement some type of project? So the solution was the cameras. And we asked ourselves, we kind of came up with there were several things we wanted to analyze, but we really wanted to ask two questions. The first one would be, would wearing body-worn video cameras reduce the number of complaints compared to a control group? And this is a randomized control trial that we did. And the second question would be, will wearing body-worn video cameras reduce the number or instances or the amount of use of force that we used compared to a control group? So a little bit of background on the department, just so you kind of know where we're at. Rialto Police Department in Southern California. It's about 28.5 square miles, population of a little over 100,000 residents. It's about a small to mid-sized police department by California standard, if you will. The experiment encompassed 54 uniformed police officers, just those on patrol, not canine, not traffic, not gang officers. We wanted everybody doing the exact same thing so the experiment would have a little bit more credibility. We have 115 total sworn police officers and 42 non-sworn. The design of the research project basically was a random assignment of all those frontline officers to shifts where you would either have the camera, it'd be working, or it wouldn't be. You turn it on or you wouldn't. We partnered with Taser International. We used the Taser Flex camera. And although I didn't have a great song or video at the beginning, and although I am horrible at math and I can't write really cool like that, I make up for it because I always bring props. So this is kind of the camera, and I'll let you look at it later on, but it's a very small device. See, this gets me out of the drawing part. And this is basically the device that we use, that we carried, and there'll be some photos as we go a little bit further. And we went live February 13th of 2012 after basically a 2-week trial period. So here's what it looks like, just so you can get an idea of the randomization process. This is what our patrol teams are deployed. We have 6 teams, 9 officers per team, 54 total in the study. That's basically how it deploys. We would feed the information into a computer, a randomizer, and it would spit out a schedule, a week-long schedule that would mirror the team deployment. So an easy example is Team 2 and Team 5 on Monday, they would wear the cameras on both days, and they would activate them, and they would record every single contact on both days. So pretty simple process. The teams were actually the unit of analysis, not the individual officers. We had a little bit over 162 officer shifts per week, where it's about 8,500 shifts, over 105,000 hours during the study. This is a quick photo of what the camera device looks like, even though I kind of brought a demo here. A lot of the officers will wear it either on a baseball cap, on their glasses, on the collar. They basically plug right into a docking station, and you can view and record through a smartphone. So you can actually make a traffic stop on somebody and play it back and watch it yourself. This is one of the sergeants that we have that does the training, and he likes to wear it on the glasses, but that's a good view on what it looks like. We used a couple of other things to help us measure some of the data that we were using. We have a system called IA Pro. It's a computerized system that tracks all of our internal affairs investigations. We have a computerized system called Blue Team, which tracks every single use of force and the outcome of the use of force. An example would be if we deployed a taser, whether it was effective or not, because we want to know if the tools that we have, if they're working or they're not working. We have an automated schedule deployment software called Telestaff. So we were able to track every single officer every day to make sure that we didn't lose anybody in the shuffle. And then finally, our digital evidence system, where we uploaded all of our video to, is called evidence.com. It's a military-grade, secure-based digital evidence system, and we had over 50,000 hours of basically data and video. So here's some of the findings real quick. Now, normally we like to work on a calendar year, but because we didn't get the experiment going until about February 13th of 2012, we went back and we took the same 12-month block. So it's still a 12-month period of time compared to a 12-month. And as you can see, the baseline data was February 13th of 2011 through February 12th of 2012. We had 24 officer complaints. During the entire same 12-month block period of time for the following year, we had 3. It's about an 87.5, almost an 88% reduction. And the reason I put the other numbers up there, we look at 09, 2010, and 2011, those are calendar year numbers compared to the other 12-month block, just to give you kind of an idea or a framework on what we're talking about. And we had one complaint that occurred on a control day, meaning that the officer was not wearing the camera, and 2 on a day where the officer was wearing a camera. So just a huge decrease. This is just kind of a visual depiction to let you know where things were. This was, if you read from left to right, you can see the number of complaints that we had, and then the little dotted line down the middle is where we started the complaint, and you can see the huge drop in the number of complaints that we had. Same chart, but just a visual depiction of both 12-month periods of time, the exact same ones from February through February, and you can see the difference. The solid line on top, yellow line on top is the baseline data, and the one on the bottom is the experimental data. So let's look at something a little more important, although complaints are important anyway, use of force. Same 12-month time period, February 13th of 2011 through February 12th of 2012. We had 61 uses of force. And a use of force for our department is basically defined for the experiment, and we kept it the same way as anything other than a basic control hold. So if I'm just going to kind of put my hands on you and sit you on the curb, that's not really a use of force. If I break out a taser, like that picture you saw at the very beginning, and zap you, that's going to be a use of force. But then you look at the experimental year, the 12-month period, we only had 25. So it's a reduction of about 59, almost 60%, and then you can look at the calendar years subsequent. Now, one thing that's important to see that's very, very telling, as you can see, there were 17 uses of force on the control day when the officers were not wearing the camera, and then there were 8 on an experiment day. So it kind of leads you to believe that mechanism, that camera, had something to do with either the officer or the suspect's mindset on what happened, because you have twice as many occurrences when they were not wearing the camera. And then the other question, just to kind of answer it, because some of you may be thinking of it, well, what about the 8 experimental ones? Did you get them all on video, or did the cops just, not record? Well, we got all 8 of them. So it's 100% compliance. Same thing, a visual depiction of just kind of how the use of force went for the baseline data, and then when the experiment started, you can see the decrease. This chart basically depicts the same 12-month period, so you can really compare apples to apples. And the top red line is the baseline data, and the broken yellow line is the experimental data. Now, I think I commented earlier about the officer proactivity and self-initiated activity. If you look at this chart, we tracked every single contact that we made by every officer. And we basically had about 3,200 more proactive self-initiated contacts by officers during the experiment as we did during the year prior. So they didn't sit in the car, they actually got out there and did more, believe it or not. This is just kind of a quick chart that shows the video downloads. And the reason you see the big peak on the left-hand side is because that was when we gave them kind of carte blanche to go out and test them and play with them. And as they kind of got used to it, you could see that those video downloads started to level off with a little bit of peaking towards the end. We also did a survey before the experiment, about halfway through and at the end, and we really found no differences in the answers whatsoever. The officers had a very high legitimacy rate for doing the job. They felt they had the backing of the police department, and it really wasn't that tough to implement the whole process. And I know I only have a couple minutes, but I'm going to go through this really quick. So here's a quick summary of just the initial year. Reduction of use of force from 61 to 25. Of the 25 use of force incidents, 17 control, 8 experiment. Of those 8, they were all captured on video. Reduction in complaints from 24 to 3. Our contacts increased from the previous year, and the survey from all the officers involved in the experiment during the control trial really showed no changes in the self-legitimacy. I know I'm going to have to go quick here. A couple other considerations, and we're actually kind of going through this data right now, is looking at things like increased case filings due to our video evidence, increased convictions, the impact on domestic violence cases, and being able to capture what's happening right at the time it's taking place. From an administrator's standpoint, a guy that pushes a pencil a lot, the cost savings on complaint investigations and use of force, you saw the numbers that I had on the map earlier. Reductions in basically frivolous complaints, and what that all adds up to is basically putting cops back out on the street where they need to be. I'll skip through these real quick because I want to make sure that I get to this, because I want to try to stay on track. So we took another year of data because we were really curious to see if, because we had somebody tell us, hey, well, maybe the cops behaved during the experiment. They were all on board, they were all excited, so they thought it was cool, so they didn't do anything. So what we have here is something just to kind of show you the difference in an additional 12-month time period. Keeping in mind, we started the experiment, we used 54 officers. We increased by about 25 because more people were wearing them because we went live with the whole department in patrol. It's about a 47% increase in personnel. We had one more complaint in year 2. So it looks like we're doing something right. And this is kind of what it looks like. Might be tough to see from the back. And then finally, use of force, pretty much similar. We went ahead and calculated that second year data. It went from 25 to 33, but again, keep in mind, we increased our staffing, everybody using the cameras, of about 46, 47%. So in my mind, it's kind of a wash when you add that in. But the numbers are still holding very, very true. And that's pretty much kind of what it looks like in a graph form. And then the last thing, and I think I'm going to make time, aren't I? Wow, that was good. You know, we're doing a lot of different things, trying to kind of mine the data and figure out where we're getting a savings cost or what we're really doing. But we did find a huge reduction as it relates to court time for our officers testifying. We haven't really put a handle on it, whether it's case convictions or people pleading guilty because of video. We're pretty sure that's what it is. But this past year, we had about a 32, almost a 33% reduction in court costs. So when you consider, you know, if you're a huge department like New York, LAPD, or something else, think of the amount of money that you can save just on not going to court for your own organization. That doesn't include any of the other subsequent costs that might be in the justice system. And then finally, we did work with the ACLU on the project. They kind of helped us hone our policy. They were very, very good. I have to say, you know, to be honest, we didn't agree on everything, but we agreed to disagree on a couple of things, but they were very beneficial in helping us kind of put the framework on the policy, and actually it worked out very, very well. With that being said, I'll be around for a little bit afterwards. I have some cards, you can email me. The study is up on the website at the Police Foundation, or if you want a separate copy of a broader PowerPoint, I'd be happy to email that to you, because normally I do this and it takes about an hour and a half, and there's videos and all kinds of other stuff, but I wanted to stick to the time frame. But I thank you very much for your time this afternoon.